I might have to duck through an alley. God, how embarrassing. What's that man doing in the alley? Is he taking a piss? Oh my God. How old are you, mister? 18. I'm only 18. Good afternoon, Venters. How are you? Guys, I wanted to talk a little bit about eggs. I went to Walmart yesterday and a dozen eggs was $4. It's not that $4 is gonna, break anybody, but when they used to be $1.50 for a dozen and now they're $4, that's a little concerning. As a matter of fact, last year, according to PBS, what's PBS, Jesse? It's that station where they play Sesame Street, Bob. Remember Sesame Street, everybody, in Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? Apparently, at the beginning of 2024, eggs averaged about $2.50 a dozen for grade A eggs here in the States. By the end of 2024, they were up to about $4.15 on average, and that's about where they are now across the country. The Agricultural Department, however, is predicting that they're going to go up another 20%. So I'm assuming by the end of this year, we're looking at eggs that are going to be averaging probably in the area of $5, maybe $6 a dozen. That's hella expensive. I went out to a place called Mimi's Cafe this weekend and I had eggs there. One of the things that I'm kind of worried about is the whole idea of those egg prices going up and affecting restaurants. And I think that's already starting to happen around the country. So Venters, tell me wherever you are, if you don't mind, tell me what the average price of a dozen eggs is at the supermarket where you like to go each week. I love eggs. So what's your favorite egg? I always like Over Easy. And since I've been in my 40s, I've been ordering them over medium. For whatever reason, I just like them cooked a little bit more than I used to. But I think that's because every restaurant you go to out here in Arizona, there's a little sign that says, beware of foodborne illnesses. Make sure you cook your eggs thoroughly, right? So I'm always like, okay, give me the over medium. Some of you are really fond of scrambled eggs. Some of you like poached, right? Some of you guys might like hard-boiled eggs. As a matter of fact, I like hard-boiled eggs as well. I like eggs darn near anyway. If you're like me and you like them no matter how they're served, let me know. By the way, in case you're wondering, in 2024, the overall cost of food went up about 2.5%. So you can tell that eggs are kind of skyrocketing way ahead of the competition when it comes to prices. According to PBS, the main reason behind this is because of the bird flu. So the wild birds, some way, somehow give it to the domestic cows, right? In the farms and ranches. Those cows then provide milk to the barnyard cats. And apparently when those cats get a hold of the bird flu, a lot of times they end up perishing left and right. By the way, apparently right now, in history, we are finding eggs that are the highest price that they've ever been. Eggs were always one of those things where you knew if you had a couple bucks, you could buy a dozen and there was your breakfast for the whole week. You can't really do that anymore if eggs start going up to $4, $5, $6, which they are now. By the way, for fun, Good Morning America said that the most expensive eggs they found was at some gas station for like $14. Could you imagine spending $14 for a dozen eggs? That means the price of one egg is what a price of a dozen eggs was just 3 or 4 years back. In case you're wondering, New York and LA, of course, have the highest priced eggs. They were saying because technically you have to drive it out to New York and LA and it's the furthest distance from the local farms and stuff. I think it's just one of those curses that comes with New York and LA. I think what they do is they find out what the average price is of anything and they just make it exorbitantly higher in those locations. They've had 66 human cases of bird flu One person passed away, but apparently he was dealing with some comorbidities. By the way, before 2020, I don't think I ever heard of the word comorbidity. Did you guys? God, comorbidity is one of those words that it seems like you hear all the time now. Hey, by the way, have you ever had this situation? I go yesterday to Fry's, I'm in the deli, I'm making my purchase, and the guy behind the counter hands me my food. Meanwhile, you can tell he's got like a head cold or something, right? You can barely understand him. He sounds sick as a dog. And he's all, yeah, I'm pumped up on Theraflu. So I'm sitting here basically getting my food from a guy that's sick. And now all of a sudden it's like you start to feel a little under the weather and you can't help but think, did that guy get me sick? I hope that guy didn't get me sick. So here's what I'm hoping. Here's my prayer for myself. I'm hoping that I can just kind of walk that lagging feeling off. You ever notice right before you get sick, you feel a little scratch in your throat? You start to feel like a little, I don't know, I don't even know how to explain it. You just don't feel yourself. But I'm hoping to goodness that it's just the heat of the day. So I want you guys to think about something. What if the price of eggs gets super high? Like, what if it starts getting up there at $8, $9, $10 for a dozen of eggs? That means when you go to Denny's, right, and you get your Grand Slam meal that's normally, what, $8, $9, all of a sudden it's gonna cost $14, $15, $16. And at restaurants like I like to go, Mimi's, where it already costs $14 or $15, it's probably gonna push the price of your breakfast platter up to $20. Golly. It's impossible to eat out without spending an atrocious amount of money. That's one advantage that single people have. When you're single, you can go to a restaurant, you can buy an appetizer, your meal, you can even buy a dessert, you can get whatever you want to drink, and it's always gonna cost you less than it would if you had a partner with you, right? So obviously there are negatives to being single, right? Sometimes you might get lonely. Sometimes you might feel like you're missing out. But I'll tell you what, when you get in and out of a restaurant for 20 or 25 bucks, it sure does feel a lot better than dropping 50 or 60 bucks. Whenever I take my daughter and her husband and my granddaughter out for breakfast, guys, I'm not even joking, it's like $80. And then you want to know what they do? They say $80 and then they put 15% gratuity. And before you know it, you're spending $100 for what basically is just bacon and eggs. It's crazy. But at the same time, if it means you get to spend time with your kids and their family, it's worth it. But they always stick me with the bill. They always stick me with the bill. So even though I got that information from the PBS channel, I'm gonna read you some comments that I got from the Good Morning America channel, because I thought some of them were kind of leftish and kind of funny. But you know, that's okay, we'll read them anyway, they're fun. Anything JW says, least expensive, ? In your own backyard from my own chicken. So this is a guy that's just like my neighbor, he's got chickens in his backyard. He probably gets fresh eggs all the time, which is wonderful and nice and fine and dandy, but still, it can be annoying for your neighbors. From what I understand, chickens aren't all that loud. It's mainly just the roosters. So here's my fear. Let's say you did have some chickens in your backyard, and let's say none of your neighbors cared. Let's say they liked your chickens. So every day you go out, you get some farm fresh chickens right there in your backyard little mini farm, right? And all of a sudden, what if one of your chickens perishes? Did they perish from an illness? And I suppose if they did, the other chickens would probably start falling like flies too. That could be a scary situation. Now let's pretend like the bird flu takes a jump and becomes where all of a sudden humans start to get attacked, right? And humans start to get sick from the bird flu. I know it's not happening now, but in theory, they say it could happen in the future. All of a sudden, I could picture neighbors turning on other neighbors. Is this because my chickens are too loud? No, it's because they have the bird flu. God, you know it's crazy? There are so many birds that are constantly flying everywhere you look. If the bird flu does end up becoming really, really huge, could you imagine if all of a sudden half the birds just disappeared? Or even scarier, have you ever seen a bunch of them kind of flying together? Could you imagine if just out of the blue they started falling out of the sky? God, that could be really traumatic. You know what else is traumatic? When a guy that's nearly 50 probably should have went pee before he went on his walk. Oh my goodness. I don't know what it is, but it just, when you have to go pee as a borderline 50-year-old, you've got to go pee. But I'm still able to hold it somewhat, and it's just a light feeling. Go away, Jesse. You don't have to go pee. You don't have to go pee. Think dry thoughts. Don't think of the bottom of the toilet. Have any of you guys ever, as an adult, have you ever had a dream that you were urinating in the toilet and then woke up and found out you peed the bed? It's embarrassing. That happened when I was 26. Consider yourself lucky. I don't tell that to many people, but I thought I'd share it with you just in case you do that regularly. I want you to know that, I did it one time, maybe twice. Mike Lagarastesta, 8089, says, complaining about egg prices, yet you do not complain when you go to McDonald's in the morning for your Egg McMuffin. It's ridiculous. Yes and no. I think the Egg McMuffin tastes really delicious. Do I think it's fair that something that is basically just an English muffin with an egg and a tiny sliver of ham should cost $8.99 or whatever the hell it does? No, I don't think that's fair. But because it's so darn expensive, I think what McDonald's should do is, even if the prices of eggs goes sky high, I think they should freeze their prices. They're already charging us a horrible amount for their Egg McMuffins. Well, Jesse, they have to. Why, Bob? Because they pay all their workers $20 an hour. And then you start to realize that there are consequences to raising minimum wage. Well, don't you want those people to be able to live? Yes, but if every time we give somebody a raise, it equates to everybody's prices going through the roof, then it ends up hurting more than helping. Remember, back when people used to work for $5 and $6 an hour, there used to be apartments that they could afford. Now people that make minimum wage are complaining that there's nowhere for them to live. So you can't just say, oh, the answer is paying them more. If you pay them more and it makes the rent go up $300, it's a wash that ends up affecting us all. But even though I say that, if you make minimum wage, I can't blame you for wanting to make more. Who wants to make, $12 an hour in this economy, in this day and time? It's impossible to live off of. Morris Monet says $4.17 a dozen at my local Walmart. So I think Morris Monet is probably seeing the same thing I saw, because that's what they were. They were like $3.99. You figure basically $4. But again, I feel like it was just yesterday that it was like $1.50 for a dozen. And I feel like 5-6 years ago, it was like 89 or 99 cents for a dozen. Am I having a false memory? Or do you guys remember egg prices being a little bit closer to like $1 or $1.50 a dozen as well? I might have to duck through an alley. God, how embarrassing. What's that man doing in the alley? Is he taking a piss? Oh my God. How old are you, mister? 18. I'm only 18. I think when you're 18, you're allowed to dip into an alley and take a piss. If you're 48, it looks really awkward. What are you doing in my alley? Nothing, sir, nothing. Are you peeing? Okay, real quick, venters, give me your best I had to pee story. Have you ever been driving home far away from any restaurant or anything and had to pee? Were you the type that would pull over and pee on the side of the street, or did you just find a way to just hold it and make it home? Hopefully we don't hear any stories of people that say, I couldn't hold it, I couldn't stop, I just peed on myself. Hopefully you guys don't have any stories like that. I remember one time when I was married, my wife and her friend Melissa, they were on a sled, and they were sledding down a mountain, and they were going right towards a pole. And it was scary because they were going fast, and we're not very used to snow out here, so they didn't really know how to slow down or stop. But some way, somehow they survived. They actually hit the pole, but somehow, some way they didn't get hurt. But all of a sudden, my wife yells back, "Melissa peed herself!" And you might think that's funny, and it was funny. I laughed, everybody laughed, but that was the point. It wasn't just us. There was like hundreds of people there. And it was just like, God, that was the type of person that my wife was at the time. Now, I don't want to hold that against her because that happened like 20 years ago, right? But if you're the type that goes out of the way to embarrass and humiliate people, that's a character flaw. Don't you guys agree? That is a definite character flaw. Now, here's a little bit of karmic retribution, or Schadenfreude, whatever the Germans call it, right? A couple of minutes later, she was on the sled by herself, and she hit a bump, and she ended up becoming airborne like 4 or 5 feet in the air. And everybody saw this, right? And when she came down, she knocked the wind out of herself. But she did it in a way where it was like, well, boom, ugh. And I swear, everybody thought that she perished. It was that hardcore how she landed. And she was just out of wind for about 30 seconds or so. But she landed so hard. And I remember thinking, that's what you get for making fun of people. So all of a sudden, everybody was kind of giggling, because it's like, here's the overweight woman, you know, hitting a bump in the road and going airborne, because she was pretty overweight at that time. It's funny how sometimes people that have these flaws, they like to poke fun at others because they feel like it takes the spotlight off of them. I'm sure you guys know many people like that. You might even be a person like that. It's one of those things where you want to say, you know what, I didn't handle myself as well as I could have. And if I had a chance to go back, I would be a better, nicer person. Sometimes it's not easy making the right decision in life. But one of the things that I've noticed as I get older and as you have kids and grandkids, you want people to be kind to your children and to your grandchildren, right? And you can't ask for people to be kind if you yourself are rude and mean and hateful. So even though I consider myself to be a super nice guy nowadays, right? There was a time in my teens and my 20s and stuff where I was always looking to fire off a joke at the expense of others. Now, if you have good friends that can take it and give it, it's no big deal. But a lot of times we end up making fun of people that just really don't like that stuff. So if you're ever in a situation where you like to make fun of people regularly, like I said, try to do it with people that can handle it. Don't do it with people where they legitimately get their feelings hurt. Okay, GGG520 says, let's rename the Gulf of Mexico to improve the economies for families. Said nobody. So I'm sure you guys heard President Trump wants to rename the Gulf of Mexico Gulf of America. I thought it was funny. I don't think it's a huge big deal, right? But apparently, people in Mexico got a little offended by it, and a little bit of the Democratic side of the aisle think it's kind of ridiculous. Those things don't help you with the price of eggs, obviously, but at the same time, I think we can all agree, I don't think that necessarily increased the price of eggs either. Take Shikovach 5165 says, so what now? ? Will conservatives blame Trump now for inflation? Here's the thing. I don't know if you could really blame a guy that's only been in the office for, 2 weeks? But at the same time, you know what? When Biden was in there, I was the type that blamed darn near everything on him. So if you guys want to have your moment in the sun and blame everything on Donald Trump, aka the Orange Man, I say go for it. Whatever makes you feel better. Most boring walk ever. It's because I'm thinking about not peeing. It's crazy. That's the equivalent of having something else on your mind. You ever talk to somebody and you're trying to have a conversation with them and they're conversing back and forth with you, but you can just tell that they're preoccupied. They literally have something else going on in their head. In my case, I have to pee like a racehorse, but in most people's cases, they might have legitimate problems. They might be going through a separation. They might be stressing out because they can't afford eggs. They might be having a problem with their car. There's so many reasons. Now, here's what you need to do, Venter. Pick up on that. When you feel like your friend is going through a tough time, don't just look away and pretend like it doesn't exist. Ask them, what's going on? Are you okay? Do you need me to give you some money for your rent? All right, don't do that. Don't do that. Here's the problem with giving friends something big. If you give them 20 or 30 bucks and they don't pay you back, it's no big deal. It's 20 or 30 bucks. But if you end up doing what a lot of people do, which is lending their buddies 1,500 bucks or something crazy for their rent, you're never going to get your money back. You're going to end up hating that friend, and they're never going to talk to you again. So one of the reasons why it's not smart to lend big amounts of money to people is because it's literally like paying to not have a friend with them anymore. And I tell people that too, by the way. Whenever I have people ask me for an exorbitant amount, I say, I'm not going to lend that to you because I'm not going to risk our friendship. If you want 20, 30 bucks, heck, if you want 100 bucks, I'm here for you. But if you need $2,000 or something crazy for your rent, do you know how hard it is to catch up? Have you ever known anybody that gets $2,000-3,000 behind and is able to catch up? It's literally impossible. They always tell you the same thing. Hey, can you lend me this? I'm a little short on my rent. I'll get it back to you next week. And then 2 weeks later, they've disconnected their phone and they won't reach out to you. You go knock on their door, they act like they're not there. I'm telling you, and you guys know this is true. No matter how much you like a person, never ever pay for their rent again unless you can afford just to give somebody a bunch of money. But I don't think any friendship is worth that. That's why people that are good with their bills always tell people you need to save up $1,000. That's the magic number. Save up 1,000 bucks because it makes it where if you're ever sick and you miss work, you can still kind of pay your bills so you don't have to start asking people. Sub-Zero says, #Trumpflation, and the tariffs haven't even hit yet. So yeah, the tariffs are going to go into effect eventually, probably, right? And prices are going to go up, and they might not ever come down to reality. I think that's just something that we're going to have to deal with. I never saw the prices that we pay for stuff nowadays. I never see those going back to what we paid 5 or 6 years ago. The hope is just that they kind of sustain themselves and just stay where they are for a couple of years. But even that's wishful thinking. I'll tell you what's not wishful thinking. Right now, I'm at the end of my walk, but that doesn't mean you have to be at the end of yours. I challenge you, go for a double walk. If you just took a half-hour walk with me, just take another half hour. It'll do miracles for us as we go into day 45. This is when we start losing weight. So good luck. I'll see you tomorrow.